Cyril Ramaphosa defended South Africa's land policy after Trump's threats to cut off funding because of what he said was due to the land confiscation in South Africa. He had gone on to say, without citing evidence, that South Africa is confiscating land and certain classes of people were being treated very badly. And he threatened that he would cut funding until the matter was fully investigated. So welcome to you. We always look forward to your insights. And over to you. What do you make of all of this?
Good morning. And part of this, of course, is that every one of Donald Trump's actions as president so far seemed to have the texture of trying to overthrow the established arrangements, to tear up all the previous understandings, and to remove agreements that he is not comfortable with. And this includes the way in which the government itself is being organized. I think that although the furor over his comments about South Africa matter to South Africa, you have to see them in a larger context. He's in the process, or at least his designates are, and that includes Elon Musk, who is an informal advisor, world's richest man, has the ear of the president. His efforts to basically demolish the structure of the USAID program, USAID as an institution, and many other things. You made reference to the Canadian and Mexican tariff. It's not entirely clear what his objectives were vis-a-vis Mexico and Canada. And if that's true, it's really hard for us to figure out whether or not the agreement now represents a victory for Donald Trump, or for common sense, or simply a recognition that the two countries, Canada and Mexico, are already on a path to do the things they said they were going to do before all this unpleasantness erupted. But let's go back to the South African issue. Presumably, what's happened with Mr. Trump is that somebody has yet again whispered to him that the new land bill that was passed and now signed by the South African president represented some sort of ignominious land grab away from presumably white farmers to be redistributed to hordes of other people, hence the horrible things that are happening to some groups. But in fact, expropriation or declarations of eminent domain are common to many countries. And audience members that may have visited Paris, for example, and admired those wonderful boulevards, those sweeping vistas through the city, that was a city planning exercise by Bernard Haussmann back in the 19th century, which required expropriation and declarations of eminent domain. The French may have called it something else, but that's what it was, because older structures and older narrow streets were swept away to make way for those beautiful boulevards that we all love. And you sit there and you have your coffee and you look down the street and it's lovely. Or if you go to New York, and many of your audience members probably have passed through New York at some point in their lives, they almost inevitably found their way to one or another of the attractions, or the lushness of Central Park, which is a huge park right in the middle of Manhattan Island, which was similarly created through expropriation and declarations of eminent domain. And obviously, if a government builds an airport or a new highway or a canal or even a bridge for that matter, eminent domain is declared, property is taken, and valuation is made, and then the previous owners are compensated accordingly. So the land bill in South Africa is part of that larger legal texture that people should be familiar with. But of course, it gets tinged here by virtue of racial history and the politics of land ownership. So whoever it was who whispered to Donald Trump that some horrific thing was happening um, is drawing inspiration, presumably from a political party here, which drew inspiration as well from a number of right-wing academics in the U.S. and in South Africa. And of course, it appeared on television in the U.S. 6 or 7 years ago in the first Trump administration, a similar charge as the bill
Yes.
was moving forward. And I mean, we all know at this point that Donald Trump sometimes speaks or tweets or whatever we call it now, or social messages in some way, based pretty much on the evidence or information or the idea of the last person he's talked to. And he's given to sending these things out late at night by the dozens while the rest of us are trying to get some sleep. And so there we are. And this has, of course, led to him announcing that aid to South Africa would be halted until a thorough investigation was conducted. Now, let's be real about this. The American embassy in South Africa's job is to pay attention to political and social and economic developments, and I'm sure that they have issued any number of telegrams back to Washington or memos describing this land reform process because it's been an issue in this country for decades. And the idea that this was a sudden discovery is ludicrous. Uh, but this also fits into that larger texture of halting all foreign assistance programs around the world, except for those that are for, as was stipulated, dire humanitarian needs. And I assume that means food emergencies in places where there's actual starvation, Sudan, for example, or aid to a couple of Middle Eastern nations as part of a larger geopolitical strategy. So this particular outburst is part of a much larger texture rather than something that is uniquely aimed at South Africa, even though South Africans may feel particularly pained by the outburst.
I I was actually quite bemused by it, given all of his utterances over the past while since he's taken office. However, some people may think that he's very impulsive and probably foolish in the things he says. But the sad reality, or the reality, is that he does hold a lot of power, and he does seem to get what he goes after. But that being said, in South Africa itself, the right wing obviously seem to be very pleased by the utterances made by Donald Trump. AfriForum has come out and they've made statements as well, being in full agreement with him. In part, the DA as well are in support of what Donald Trump is saying. But I like the way you explained and broke down the whole issue around what exactly expropriation does mean, because I had a governance expert on the show yesterday, South African governance expert, and we touched on the very same issue. And he too um, alluded to exactly what you had said regarding expropriation, that they won't necessarily, land won't be taken, there won't be land grabs. And I think this is the fear amongst certain people in South Africa, that this will be a free for all, a land grab. And he reassured me that that's not what expropriation is all about. Very much similar to what you had said, for the express use of perhaps hospitals, schools, highways, byways, etc., etc., etc. But that being said, Trump has threatened to take away aid from South Africa. We do know that we get a sizable amount of aid in the way of the HIV/AIDS program. If he is serious about it and does withhold that aid to South Africa, will it hurt us?
Well, let me just do two things. First, let me say that it's easy to understand why South Africans generally the very word land and put it together with land grab uh, triggers all kinds of neurons pulsing away because the country has obviously a history of land uh, grabs, land appropriations from people who were here before on behalf of people who came later. And that's woven inextricably into South Africa's history, and so it's a very tender kind of conversation, and often a very angry one for people because and I know people who can say that they used to own a house or a piece of property in place X, and then along came the government 50, 60 years ago, and they no longer had that piece of property or that piece of land. And it was done uh, on the basis of an earlier version of social planning, a much larger process we call appropriately enough apartheid. But to your specific question about whether holding back on foreign assistance to South Africa will hurt, um, I want to correct one thing that uh, let me get it right here. I had the data in front of me. Now we have to get it again. Yeah, um, the total, as I can find it now, in the last fiscal year that was reported from the U.S. to South Africa in all ways, $323 million and some change. All right, so now add another zero and double that, and you roughly get rand terms. So that makes it 7 billion rand or thereabouts. Most of it goes to health and health related issues, specifically uh, anti HIV and AIDS activities. But there are other programs as well. So the South African government, in its response yesterday, was not totally accurate in saying it is only PEPFAR. There are other programs, but to be fair, the PEPFAR HIV and AIDS program is by far the largest portion of it. PEPFAR activities, the anti-HIV and AIDS program, is not solely a U.S. government project. South African government puts substantial resources into it. Private sector resources go into it from pharmaceutical companies and other medical companies, and um, international philanthropic foundations make considerable contributions as well. The money that the U.S. government contributes is significant, but the program itself will not collapse without it, although it would certainly be more limited. Will it hurt the average person who depends on PEPFAR programs and related activities for their antiretrovirals or their counseling or their treatment or their post-infection treatment? Yes, I'm sure it'll hurt a little bit. That means it's incumbent on the South African government not to plead its case. That's not what I'm arguing here. It's incumbent on the South African government to make it clear just exactly what the new land measure is and what it is not. And that becomes crucial. It's not a question of begging, it's a question of making it clear that this is what we're doing consistent with the practices of many other countries, including the United States. Because one of the things we do know about Donald Trump is that although he has certain obsessions about things, not the least of which is in America what's called DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusiveness programming, which he has really pushed hard to abolish across the federal government. His attention span on activities is not that great. The searchlight picks up something in bright light, but then it moves on, and there will be other issues for him to fight. He's declared in effect a victory with negotiations with Canada and Mexico, although the criteria of that victory remains a little obscure to most people looking at it. Yes, the Canadians are going to add more policing of their border, but they'd already had the plan to do it anyway. Yes, the Mexicans are sending more Mexican federal troops to their border to stop fentanyl illicit imports into the U.S. and undocumented aliens, illegal migrants, but they'd already pledged to do that. So he can declare victories on all manner of things and then move on to the next object of his attention. And that's part of the way he does business.
Thus, I said he's very, very impulsive. Let's go for our first ad break. And when we get back, a few other issues that I'd like to unpack with you. I am talking with Brooks Spector. He's the associate editor at the Daily Maverick. He's also a retired U.S. diplomat. Stay with us.
Joining hands, Salam Media. Humanity sets the agenda.
You know, it's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil, triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying, or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
They say breakfast is the most important meal of the day, yet many children go to school hungry because of poverty. Penny Appeal South Africa's Breakfast Club aims to get a warm, hearty meal to underprivileged children so they can spend their day prospering in their schoolwork. Help feed a needy learner for only 5 Rand a day, or 150 Rand a month. Or visit our website www.pennyappeal.org.za or call 031 1100 573 to find out how you can donate. Penny Appeal South Africa. Small change, big difference.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042-203-1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Valley's Motor Spares. We supply motor spares and accessories for all makes and models of motor cars, LDVs, buckies, trucks, and earth-moving equipment. We deliver on time, every time. Please contact us via WhatsApp on 014-592-0925 or call 014-592-0925 or visit 28 Zenderling Street, Rustenburg. Remember the name. Valley's Motor Spares.
Abu Hurairah narrated that he heard the Prophet Muhammad, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, say, in black seed there is a healing for every disease except death. This Ramadan, experience the health benefits of this ancient blessed seed by using the Tib Black Seed range. Black seed assists the body to boost immunity, regulate blood sugar levels, reduce inflammation, and act as a potent antioxidant. Experience a holistic approach to health by introducing the Tib Black Seed range into your Ramadan routine. Available in capsules, pure cold-pressed oil, and a vapor rub. Trust Tib Health Sciences for quality black seed products. For more information, visit blackseed.co.za. Available at leading pharmacies.
Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam Media. Humanity sets the agenda.
Welcome back. It is 8:25 a.m. News and Views on Salam Media. We're talking with Brooks Spector. He's the Associate Editor at Daily Maverick and also retired U.S. diplomat. Brooks, welcome back. I'd like to make a comment and then I'd like your thoughts on it. And I'm going back to Trump's first term as President of the United States. At that time, he said that the U.S. would investigate large-scale killings of white farmers in South Africa and violent takeovers of land. There's no evidence, obviously, of such killings or takeovers of land of the sort that happened, for example, in Zimbabwe. And of course, he goes on to say, and when we talk about Zimbabwe, we're talking about the early 2000s. In 2023, Trump's ally, South African-born Elon Musk, accused the South African government of seeking a genocide of white people. Now, that notion, as we know, circulates in far-right chat rooms, and it attempts to link land reform to murders of white farmers during robberies, saying the killings are acts of state-sponsored ethnic cleansing, aiming to scare whites off their land. And of the roughly 20,000 murders committed in South Africa every year, around only 50 of the 20,000 murders are of white farmers. Most of the victims are black. Now, regardless of the numbers, any killing, any murder of an innocent person is abhorrent. We don't, we don't go along with that at all. But I'm sharing this comment with you, and I'm wondering the thoughts during Trump's first administration. Would these type of narratives resurface again post the utterances that he made 2 days ago?
Well, I think part of the challenge is that rumors and allegations and insinuations and, the kind of, I heard from somebody who has a friend who has a cousin whose best friend's nephew's niece's daughter-in-law had this happen to them. That kind of thing, A, is almost impossible to track down the origins of the comment. But B, it's almost equally impossible to cut it off, to squelch it, to stop it, because we live in a world now, as you know, where all manner of nonsense circulates on social media in all kinds of channels, right wing, left wing, crazy. The number of conspiracy theories that are subscribed to by people is, I run out of fingers for it, I guess. Just the most recent example, not related to Donald Trump, except in the most tangential of ways, was the recent fuss about drones flying over the state of New Jersey by the dozens on behalf of the Chinese or Martians or secret U.S. government programs or who knows what. No one would, you could never get a straight answer. And then by the time we got to the end of this, it was clear that virtually every one of those drones had already had Federal Aviation Authority flight clearance, A, or B, they were people sending drones up to look for the other drones. But I mean, and it goes on like that.
Mm.
This narrative that uh, farmers are being rounded up by the dozens and systematically driven off their farms or killed. Uh, Part of that really derives from the fact that there are occasional killings, and the killings are a function in large part from two factors, as I understand it. One, farmers tend to live in more isolated circumstances than you or I do in a city. And so they are easier victims. And two, there is a clear distinction or differentiation between a farmer who has a lot by some people's standards and many people who have very little, and the envy and jealousy that ensues from that, which leads to violence, which leads to killing. So if you put all that together, and if it is being fed in a narrative by a political party or an occasional academic with an itch to scratch, or um, organizations in the U.S. that are hoping to achieve uh, greater racial animosity, let's be honest, uh, then you have a rumor, you have a factoid that's almost impossible to get rid of. That's why governments have to behave in a way which is rational and thoughtful and clear on the basis of real information and facts. And of course, as we know, Donald Trump fires off these messages, at a rapid fire clip without any factual or informational basis to back them up. And we have to live with the consequences of this kind of thing.
Sadly, he has absolutely no sense of diplomacy, even though he is the number one in the USA. Let's wrap up by asking the all important question: what can he do? How can his rantings hurt South Africa? Should we be looking at the bigger picture? And that would be that the trade issue. A quarter of South Africa's 15 billion exports to the US gets preferential tariffs under AGOA. And of course, we're kind of wondering, and this also makes up 2% of South Africa's total exports. Do you think that if he is kind of goaded or gets more fired up about the situation in South Africa, that he would slap us with tariffs and hurt us as far as our exports are concerned? That would be the
Um,
bigger worry, isn't it?
Yeah, well, no, it is. I'm not sure about your number that says 2% of total exports. I think it's larger than that. But be that as it may, um, yes, there is a genuine reason to be concerned, but it's not specifically by virtue of Donald Trump's most recent social media nonsense. There are a considerable number of people who are Republicans in Congress who are not happy with the way South Africa has behaved, quote unquote, in international circumstances, and in part this is because of its evident embrace of Russia, China, and Iran, and to a lesser degree, it's my reaction or my feeling, uh, the way it has acted at the International Court of Justice. And AGOA, as you mentioned, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, is not a trade treaty, it's US law that allows South African and 30 some other African countries tariff free access to the American market. South Africa's done very well on that score. It exports, believe it or not, a lot of people will say, really, but it exports finished automobiles and automobile parts and highly processed agricultural commodities to the United States duty free. If there is a tariff on those products, it would make it more of a hill to climb for them to be exported. It wouldn't eliminate them, but it would make them less competitive in the American market, say. Now, AGOA is due for ending as law this year in November, I believe. and it is either going to be renewed as it is, it's going to be revised in some way, or it's simply not going to be passed at all by Congress. And if that happens, then there will be no tariff-free window. There'll be the standard set of tariffs from most countries. South Africa may be exempted or may be left out of it in the future, either because of its international political stances or perhaps because it is seen to be a middle income country and no longer necessarily appropriate for it to gain the benefits of the AGOA window. All that is subject to future debate within Congress if it chooses to do it. My advice to South Africa's government would be, if I were asked, which I have not been, if I were asked, I would be arguing for a much clearer, better explanation of what this land bill, this land law is all about and why it fits into a larger project aimed at more social equity and consistent with the other versions of things in many other countries, A. But B, I would also, and this is where it gets interesting for me, I would be recommending that South Africa, together with many other African nations, begin to propose trade agreements or trade discussions or trade negotiations with the United States. Because as we started our discussion, Donald Trump's government is going to be intensely transactional in this year and going forward, and proposing things rather than simply waiting for the inevitable wave of things is, I think, a better way forward. But that requires a unanimity of purpose and purposefulness. And I'm not sure I see that yet.
Brooks Spector, always a pleasure talking with you. Thank you indeed for your insights. He is associate editor at Daily Maverick and a retired US diplomat. Go well, God bless. It is 8:36 on News and Views right here on Salam Media, and we're coming to you with lots more interesting interviews throughout the show.